As I've said, these are historic talks, no doubt, because right now the US Vice President is meeting with the leadership of Iran face to face in Islamabad. No doubt it is historic. But the US comes to these talks having committed war crimes. And now those war crimes are being confirmed by the New York Times. So there is that. But before I get into what the New York Times is reporting today, Fox News has brought on its usual loud, vociferous, warmongering folks. One who is saying that here is a list of all the Iranians who are present in Pakistan and the US should begin assassinating them. You heard that right. The Fox News general or retired general, whatever he is saying that the US should show Iran who's boss and start assassinating them. I think what he has forgotten is exactly where these Iranians are as we speak. And obviously Pakistanis jumped right in, and Pakistani analysts and folks reminded this person that Pakistan is a nuclear state, and that Pakistan has already shown that the Iranian delegation is under their protection and perhaps will remain under their protection for a while to come. And that made me think that right now, the way I see it is that it's really an Israel versus Pakistan situation that is going on, where Pakistan seems to be, through various means, countering the Israeli threat and the Israeli aggression and the threats of assassination of the Iranian leadership. And so Pakistani analysts and journalists started saying that I think nobody in the world should forget that Pakistan is a nuclear state and that right now the talks are happening in a nuclear state. So there is that. So don't even begin to talk about assassinations by Israelis on the Iranian delegation. Interesting, I think, geopolitical dynamics where who's facing off against whom, who is in sort of a power, show of power, and in what way against whom. I think the issue of Pakistani fighter jets on display last night was also, I think, a way to show the world Pakistan's capabilities. I think there is a real show of power, regional power going on, and the fact that Pakistani jets were in the air and we don't know how far into the region, which would mean that they were dominating the airspace for a while. So interesting conversations going on, interesting geopolitical dynamics going on, but I think that Pakistan is definitely a power player in this whole scenario. So what is the New York Times saying? New evidence further implicates US missiles in strike that killed 21 civilians in Iran. Now, this is in addition to the 175 elementary school children who were killed in Minab and whose photographs Mr. Ghalibaf carried on his flight to Pakistan. Additional images and video build on an earlier analysis which the Pentagon has disputed, showing precision strike missiles or PRISM hit a sports hall, a residential area in the Iranian city of Lamerd. The US military has rejected the conclusions of earlier investigations by the Times and other news organizations that found that PRISM had hit civilian locations in Lamerd on February 28, it has denied it was attacking there on the day in question and claimed the incoming weapon captured on video more closely resembled an Iranian cruise missile called the Hoveze, given its length. The strikes killed 21 people, according to Iranian officials. The Times was able to independently verify the identities of the victims. At least 5 were children, the youngest being 2 years old. All told, that would make it the second known attack by U.S. forces to result in large-scale civilian fatalities on the opening day of the war. About 6 hours earlier, a Tomahawk missile hit a school in Minab, some 250 miles away, killing 175 people, an episode President Trump initially tried to pin on the Iranians. A military investigation's preliminary findings later showed that the United States was responsible for the strike. The latest analysis is based on new video footage of detonations, new photo evidence of the damage, a missile trajectory assessment, and the perspectives of multiple experts, including 3 U.S. government officials. The missile in the video lacks key visual features and characteristics of Hoveze, which is the Iranian missile, and is closer in size to the Prism, which is the American missile. Experts have also told the Times that Iran does not have a cruise missile that functions the way a Prism does. The Times' previous investigation identified 2 locations where Prism missiles hit in Lamerd. The reporting team has now located a third. At all 3 locations, the missile detonations seen in videos occurred directly above the target, not upon impact. This is consistent with Prism's airburst mechanism, which is designed to explode in the air and blast more than 180,000 tungsten pellets outward. At each location, those bursts of pellets created a distinctive damage pattern of pockmarking in the walls of the sports hall, nearby residential buildings, and surrounding roadways. The incoming angle of the missile captured in the video indicates it descended on Lamerd from the northwest, a direction that aligns with where U.S. forces are based, including Kuwait. The sports hall, school, and residential areas struck on February 28 in Lamerd are all within 300 yards of an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps compound, though it remains unclear if any of the buildings in the compound were indeed hit. So, U.S. Central Command, or CENTCOM, has contended that the missile seen in the video on the Lamerd attack was consistent with the dimensions and silhouettes of an Iranian cruise missile called the Hoveze, but the Times analysis as well as expert assessments essentially ruled this out. And we can go on and read more and more of this article that lends credibility to the investigation of the New York Times. Now we understand why Iran struck Kuwait, why Iran is striking or has struck the GCC countries, because they know this. Because they know that the missile that killed people in the sports hall, in residential areas, probably came from the direction of Kuwait, where there are U.S. bases. It is not willy-nilly attack because they felt like it. It is because they had already assessed the direction of the missile. As much as CENTCOM and Trump try to deny it, I think the New York Times has done a remarkable job in identifying and in pointing out through documentation as to what had happened. The Times reviewed the names of 21 people reported killed in the strikes on the sports hall, the school, and nearby residential areas. The list was initially published by Tasneem, a semi-official Iranian news agency. Another 110 people were injured, local health officials have said. The strike killed at least 5 children, including 2 girls who had been attending volleyball practice at the sports hall. They were Helma Ahmadizadeh, 10, and Ilham Zaeri, 11, whose deaths were first reported by Nagin Bagheri, a journalist based in Iran who spoke to the victims' families. According to Ms. Bagheri's reporting, Helma showed no outward signs of blood loss but told her coach that she felt as if something had entered her body. At the hospital, she was found to have a small object embedded in her. She later died from the injury. Ms. Bagheri also reported that at the adjacent soccer pitch, a young boy, Ilya Khatami, was killed alongside his coach, Mahmoud Najafi. The Times confirmed their deaths and the death of a second boy, Abdul Musawwar Rahmani, who was from Afghanistan, through funeral footage, social media posts, and local media reports. The remaining victims appear to have been killed in the 2 strikes on residential areas, according to officials cited in local media and videos and online posts by the employers and a family member of those killed in the strikes. And there are photographs of a beautiful 2-year-old, Avina Barzeghar, was the youngest victim of the U.S. strike in Lamerd on February 28. Hamid Amini, 46, who lived in Norway for years, was on paternity leave in Iran when he was killed in the strike. These are very difficult details to read and very difficult to see this 2-year-old beautiful baby. I think everybody should read this article because it really, really provides a very clear picture of what the world is dealing with and what the U.S. delegation may be facing. I would be very surprised if the Iranian delegation does not bring this up and does not say, don't believe us, these are your own newspapers, your own reporters, and we're telling you these are war crimes. Now remember, one of Iran's demands is reparations. And of course, the demand to completely halt any further strikes on Iran. I think given this reportage from the New York Times and the prior report of the Tomahawk missile hitting the school, Minab, I think the Iranians will have a strong case here.